Welcome to the finale for Census in the South, Road to Recovery Virtual Bus Tour. I'm Rebecca DeHart, CEO of Fair Count, and I'm thrilled to be here with Janine for our last stop.
Hi, I'm Janine Abrams-McLean, the Vice President of Fair Count. Tonight's presentation is so special to us. It's the culmination of more than a year and a half of what we've been working on at Fair Count for a fair and accurate 2020 census in Georgia and around the nation. We joined up with our friends at Pluribus Unum to launch this 6-state virtual bus tour. We have been in Louisiana, Mississippi, South Carolina, Alabama, Florida, and of course, Georgia. At this last stop, we will hear from so many of the partners that we have worked with along the way. We started Fair Count because the 2020 census is the bedrock of our democracy. $1.5 trillion in federal funding is on the line. Political power will be redistributed. Voting rights and economic development will be impacted. And we mostly started this because historic undercounts have time and time again left people out. The Census Bureau refers to historically undercounted communities as hard to count, but we don't believe that. We don't think that there's anything about these communities that makes them inherently hard to count. But we know that the systems in place to count them don't work well. We don't want these communities that have consistently and historically been marginalized, disenfranchised, and underrepresented to go uncounted again. We can't let these communities go another decade without the resources and political power that they deserve.
That's absolutely right. You really just showed us the systematic inequalities and inequities that we see when we're trying to get people counted, and certain communities are left out decade after decade. And we really see at Fair Count the connection between people who are undercounted in the census, experiencing voter suppression at the polls, or maybe have lower than average voter registration rates or resources for mobilization, and whose communities are really sliced and diced up in redistricting to ensure that they don't have a voice at the decision-making table. That's why we started Fair Count. We believe in building long-term power in communities without any interruption. We call it non-extractive organizing. We want to be there for every iteration of civic engagement. Now with the census, later in November with the election, onto redistricting, and even the American Community Survey. We've done it through a few different programs. We have a faith program where we work with a variety of faith leaders from different faith traditions and denominations. We started a technology innovation program where we put 150 internet installations to areas all around Georgia where there is a need for more access to the internet. We have a full field program where people are working within their communities, building that long-term power around the census. And we have a partnership program because we believe so much that when we work together with organizations that are experts within their own communities, within their own locations, that we're that much stronger. These partnerships are key to non-extractive, long-term power building. And we're so thrilled to highlight many of these partnerships right now.
Definitely. Stick with us to hear messages from the Latino Community Fund, co-chair of Black Men Count, Ryan Wilson, the president of the Georgia NAACP, James Woodall, and more.
And we'll hear from SEEP, the Southern Economic Advancement Project, bringing us a vision for a strong, equitable South. And they'll explain why the census is so crucial to that vision. Thanks for joining us.
My name is Reverend James Woodall, and I'm the state president of the Georgia NAACP. Right now, we need you to complete your census. Our communities are over-policed, they are under attack, but you can do something about it. By completing your census, you're able to resolve the issues and the deficiencies that continue to plague our communities as it relates to resources, political representation, and even racial equity. But we cannot do it without you. Go and complete your census today so that we can make sure we have a say in how our communities are ran, resourced, and ultimately resolved. Thank you. And again, go do your census. Take care.
Hola. My name is Michelle Zuluaga, and I'm the Civic Participation Manager for the Latino Community Fund Georgia. The Latino Community Fund Georgia is an organization that supports, trains, advocates, and also provides funds for other Latino-led nonprofit organizations in the state of Georgia. Today, I want to encourage everyone, especially if you're in the Latino community, to answer the 2020 census. Don't leave it for last minute, and make sure that you know that the citizenship question will not be a part of the 2020 census. The 2020 census is safe, secure, and confidential. We cannot give up the opportunity to have sufficient funds for our schools, hospitals, and the future of our Latino community. Make sure to go online and answer the 2020 census today.
Hola, soy Mónica Pirela de Notivisión Georgia. Vivo en la ciudad de Warner Robins y paso por aquí para hablarles del censo 2020. Cuando el censo falla en contar a toda la gente viviendo en una comunidad, a eso se le llama subconteo. Un subconteo hace que su comunidad no reciba su parte justa de poder político o de recursos para escuelas, calles, hospitales y programas. Eso afectaría a su comunidad por los próximos 10 años. La mejor manera de asegurarte que no haya un subconteo en el 2020 es completando el censo. Puedes hacerlo por internet a través de my2020census.gov, por teléfono llamando al 1-844-468-2020 o completando la invitación que recibiste por correo regular.
Olá, pessoal. Olá, comunidade brasileira da Geórgia, de Atlanta, todos vocês que moram nos Estados Unidos. Eu estou aqui para falar da importância do censo americano. Meu nome é Lucas de Souza Martins, eu sou mestrando em História pela Universidade Estadual da Geórgia e membro da Igreja Batista Ebenezer daqui de Atlanta. E eu estou aqui para falar em português a respeito dessa importância. Afinal, o censo é essencial para que recursos federais cheguem até as nossas comunidades. Recursos de saúde, educação, transporte, rodovias, tudo isso é essencial para a nossa vida, para o nosso dia a dia. E eu garanto a você que o seu depoimento, as suas informações, tudo isso é confidencial. O United Census Bureau não tem autorização por lei de compartilhar nenhuma informação prestada ao censo para qualquer outra instituição ou organização do governo americano. Por isso, olha, faça a sua parte. É o momento de fazer a sua parte. Acesse 2020census.gov/PT e preencha agora o census em português. Você vai levar menos de 5 minutos para fazer isso. Faça a sua parte. Comunidade brasileira, valorizemos a nossa língua, o nosso país, a nossa comunidade. Vamos preencher o censo. Um abraço a todos vocês, comunidade brasileira.
Good evening. My name is Ryan Wilson. I'm the CEO and co-founder of The Gathering Spot. I also proudly serve as the co-chair for the Black Men Count initiative at Fair Count. Now, there are two important things that I want to talk about when it comes to the census. The first thing is representation. Simply put, if we aren't counted, we won't have the representatives in office, both locally, but also representing us in DC. It's super important that we encourage all of our families and friends to make sure that they are counted in this census. The impacts are long lasting. The census lasts for 10 years. The second thing is about resources. Coming out of COVID-19 and economic collapse, we've got to make sure that all of the resources for the citizens in Georgia get to Georgia. And if we don't fill out our census, those resources simply won't get here. And so again, encourage everyone that you know to make sure that they're counted. Because if we aren't, the resources that Georgia so desperately needs won't get here. And if there's one last thing that I want to share is that it's really important to make sure that all Black men are counted in this census. Historically, Black men are undercounted. And so encourage all the Black men in your life to make sure that their voices are heard in this census. Again, the impacts are long lasting. And it's super important to make sure that all of our men and all of our families are counted. It has a huge impact on all of the resources and representation that'll make it to Georgia. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Wendy Cornelson, the Assistant State Librarian at the Georgia Public Library Service. We're based in Atlanta, but have 408 public libraries in every county around the state. Libraries are working hard to make sure Georgians have the resources they need to fill out their 2020 census. Every library in Georgia has free access to high-speed internet. And in some rural areas, this may be the only free connection that's available in town. With the census happening online for the first time, this connection is vital for some people to be able to fill out their forms. Libraries also have free Wi-Fi. You can complete your census by visiting my2020census.gov at your library today.
Hi, I'm Sarah Beth Gale.
And I'm Jenny Castillo, and we are CEAP. The Southern Economic Advancement Project, or CEAP, was founded by leader Stacey Abrams last March to translate policy to Southern and build networks across the South. CEAP spreads good ideas across the region to increase economic security and broaden economic power. CEAP's reports on climate action, rural transportation, food insecurity, and economic COVID relief have been critical to show what's needed and what's possible in the South. Right now, we are working with partners to amplify their efforts for a more equitable South as we recover from COVID-19.
Equity means all people will have an opportunity to thrive. And achieving equity means building new systems or improving existing systems so that your race or ethnicity, your gender, your zip code won't predict your outcomes in life. The South has historic and ongoing inequities, unjust systems that leave groups out from full opportunity. Our region fares among the worst on almost every major indicator of social and economic well-being, whether that's child poverty or overall poverty, infant and maternal mortality, the rate of uninsured, and a lot more. And these challenges fall disproportionately on communities of color in the South. COVID-19 has revealed racial and economic inequities in America in stark terms, particularly in the South with Black, Latinx, and poor people who are disproportionately ill, dying, or working on the front lines doing low-wage work at greater risk. Our public systems are failing us right now because they were weak by design. The South has lower rates of paid sick leave coverage, no Medicaid expansion in a lot of the Southern states, weak worker protections, and less generous unemployment systems, all of which means the gaps are likely to grow even wider in the South during this COVID recession.
Right now, access to resources isn't fair because communities are being left out. Black, brown, rural communities are undercounted or not counted at all. We must make sure that we get counted in the 2020 census. If we don't get counted, these gaps will never get filled and will only get wider. The 2020 census helps guide what communities will get for vital services like school lunches, Head Start, mental health services, and maternal health, transit, childcare, and all that relies on the strength of the people and the community in full participation. These are the exact services that will be determined on how quickly we recover from COVID-19. We're trying to tell a new story based on full participation in the 2020 census of who lives in the South, how people are living, and what we could do from a policy perspective to ensure that everyone has equal opportunity to thrive. We need full participation in the census to get a more accurate portrayal of the South. That includes half of all African Americans in the U.S., growing shares of Latinos, and significant immigrant communities.
We at CEAP work for a stronger South, and that is why we launched South Strong, a coalition of almost 200 Southern organizations, grassroots leaders, and scholars to chart a new course for the region as we recover from COVID-19. We are working towards better outcomes for all Southerners, particularly those who have suffered under racist and regressive public policy. We want to prioritize public health and safety, good jobs and workers' rights, high quality childcare and education, and much more. We can show the nation what it looks like to collectively tackle big problems. We are working to build power in communities during the pandemic so that more voices can be heard on what's needed today in the crisis and tomorrow in the recovery. We know that the recovery will be stronger if we are all counted and communities get the resources they deserve.
We urge you to visit southstrong.org to sign on to be part of our fight for justice and opportunity. The South needs you, and we need the South strong.
Special thanks to our wonderful speakers and partners for joining us tonight. We are so thrilled to be working with these organizations. Truly, together, we are stronger.
And as you said earlier, Janine, it's not just the resources that are at stake with this 2020 census, it's the political power too. Apportionment is dependent on a fair and accurate census. That will tell us how many congressional seats each state in the United States has, as well as affecting the outcome of the Electoral College. It will also give us the data that we need for redistricting, everywhere from our state House and Senate races, all the way down to local races, even the school board. This will decide who has power and who is heard for the next decade. And if communities are undercounted, then they'll be undercounted for redistricting and apportionment efforts and not have that political power they deserve.
Thank you, Rebecca. Our next guest speaks so well to this. David Litt is a former President Obama speechwriter. He's passionate about democracy and just recently wrote a book titled Democracy in One Book or Less: How It Works, Why It Doesn't, and Why Fixing It is Easier Than You Think. We had a wonderful talk with him earlier this year. He'll be joined with 2 elected representatives here in Georgia who have started their own complete count committees: United States Congresswoman Lucy McBath and United States Congressman Hank Johnson.
Hi, everybody, and good evening. The census is a crucial part of making sure that our democracy works, and that our democracy works for everybody, not just a few people at the very top. I'm just going to explain briefly why that is. See, the whole idea of America is that power doesn't just belong to some of us. All of us get some power. All of us get to decide where this country goes. We have not always lived up to that ideal as a country, but it's every generation's job to fight to bring us a little bit closer to that ideal, a little closer to that vision. And the census is how we turn that power into reality. The census is what makes your power as an American real. Because if you're not counted in the census, you're not included in the population count of your district. What does that mean? It means that, let's say 100 people live in a community, but only 50 of them are counted in the census, then that community is going to only count as having 50 people, even though 100 people are living there. 50 people basically will be written out of our democracy. And there are people who are hoping that that's exactly what happens. There are people who are hoping that some of our communities don't sign their forms, that some of our communities aren't able to get counted, so that they can seize more political power in the places where they are going to get everyone to sign up and where they are going to get people counted. That's one of the stories of America. We know that too well. Right? There's always been people who want to take power for themselves, even though they didn't earn it, even though they don't deserve it. They want more than their fair share of power. But that's not the only story of America. The other story of America, the story so powerfully exemplified by the late John Lewis, among so many others, is the story of people demanding their fair share of power, demanding their little piece of control over our democracy that is our right as an American. When you fill out your census form and you get your friends and neighbors to fill out theirs, you're not just securing federal funding for your neighborhood that you deserve. You're not just helping fulfill a constitutional mandate to count everybody. You are also seizing your piece of political power that you are entitled to as an American. You're demanding that you be heard in Washington, that you get a voice in how your country is run. So thank you, everyone, for everything you're doing. And let's get counted this year.
Greetings, everyone. This is Congressman Hank Johnson, and I need your help today. It's about the census. Georgia is behind in the census count, and if you're not counted, then we lose out on federal money that should go to our communities, and we lose political representation in Congress and also on the state and local levels. The Census Bureau can't share your information with other government agencies, so there's no risk for you in being counted. We have everything to gain and so much to lose, so let's get our numbers up, Georgia. Let's get counted.
Hey, this is Sam Park, Georgia State Representative for House District 101, which includes the cities of Lawrenceville and Sewanee in Gwinnett County, Georgia. The deadline to complete the U.S. Census is right around the corner. The census is the bedrock of our democracy, determining who receives power and resources for the next decade. Communities who don't complete the census will not receive their fair share of power and are left underfunded and under-resourced for a generation. So Georgia, let's get counted.
Hello, I'm Congresswoman Lucy McBath. I just want to take a quick moment to remind you to complete your 2020 census. This once-in-a-decade opportunity will help determine the allocation of billions of dollars in federal funding. Funding to cut down on transportation times, to serve our veterans, and to provide our children with the opportunities, education, and future we know they deserve. If we don't get counted, we are counted out. For every person that doesn't complete the census, it is estimated that Georgia will lose out on $2,300 per person per year in federal funding. The deadline to complete your census is rapidly approaching. Visit my2020census.gov and help shape your community's future today.
It was really great to hear from David and those elected officials. You know, Janine, when I think about these past 18 months, we really prepared for just about any scenario that could possibly happen to disrupt the census. I remember when we had field trainings down in Twiggs County, and our organizers would do role plays with all sorts of obstacles they may face, like let's have a census event and the power goes out or the speaker doesn't show up. I remember once even Adam was training our organizers on what would happen if the location for an event fell into a sinkhole. And we joked about, how far-fetched that may seem, but you never know what might happen. And we never thought to role play a global pandemic. COVID-19 has completely upended the 2020 census, and particularly in the South, has laid bare healthcare disparities that are costing lives.
Yes, Rebecca. COVID-19 is disproportionately impacting Black and Brown communities, especially those in the South. Studies have shown that more than 70% of the children who have died from COVID-19 are Black or Hispanic. We all feel helpless at times. It's a huge problem. There is one thing that we can do that you might not immediately think of, and that's to complete the 2020 census. Filling out the census is the first step to our road to recovery from this pandemic.
We're joined today by those who see the intersection of an accurate census and our recovery from this pandemic. Our board member, DuBose Porter, is not only an expert on Medicaid and rural health care and the policies that go into those, he's also a COVID survivor. And he is joined by some of our favorite pediatricians and founders of Kids Doc on Wheels and our friends at the Black Child Development Institute. Let's listen to what they have to say about our recovery.
Good evening. I'm DuBose Porter, the former Speaker Pro Tem and Minority Leader of the Georgia House of Representatives. I'm also currently the Treasurer for Fair Count. I'm also a newspaper editor for 7 rural newspapers, and I'm County Attorney for Wilkinson County, one of Georgia's most rural counties. But I'm here tonight as a COVID-19 survivor to raise the alarm that our response to this pandemic has the chance to shift our nation's history. It's not too late, and we can do better. And we must, because we're on a very tragic trajectory. Nowhere is this more true than in the South, and particularly Georgia. Georgia has some of the highest rates of COVID-19, and there is no sign of it slowing down. In order for us to address this crisis head on, we must come together and think about what is best for our communities as a whole. I am from that other part of Georgia, that rural part where hospitals and clinics have closed, leaving so many families without accessible health care in their communities. In fact, in the last month, the hospitals have closed in Cuthbert and Commerce, Georgia. It is no coincidence that in the same communities bearing the brunt of this pandemic have often been undercounted in our nation's every 10-year count, the census. This undercount, decade after decade, has kept communities from receiving their fair share of resources for health care, for public health, for schools, and more. And they have not received their fair share of political power either, leaving many of us less able to elect leaders who will speak up for our families. A key to us coming back from this global pandemic is a fair and accurate count in the 2020 census. It is quite simply our first step towards recovery. When we get to the other side of this pandemic, we need to return to safe, fully funded schools, to communities with affordable and accessible health care, and an economy that serves all of America's families, especially here in Georgia. If we can get a more accurate count, we could have the political clout in Georgia for Medicaid expansion and get health care accessible for 500,000 more people, mostly who live in my area of the state. It would certainly have helped through this pandemic. Friends, our road to recovery will be long, but we'll get there, and we must get there together. But it would be better for now and in the future with a more accurate count in this 2020 census. Thank you.
I am Dr. Lynette Wilson Phillips, the co-founder of Kids Doc on Wheels, a school-based telemedicine and mobile clinic serving the state of Georgia, which lacks access to pediatric care in 40% of its counties. I am a female, I am Black, born in Charleston, South Carolina, to a pharmacist, Decatur Ward Wilson, and an elementary school teacher, Gladys Seabrook Wilson, 4 years and 2 days before the death of Martin Luther King Jr. on April 4th, 1968. In Atlanta, Georgia, trained at Emory University to serve the community as a pediatrician. 2020 has been a year of milestones. Georgia has a higher number of children infected with COVID-19 in comparison to the national rate. You can make a difference in 2 ways this year. Number one, it is important for us to vote November 3rd in person via early voting at your local precinct, or plan your date to vote on November 3rd. But more importantly, the purpose that we are here for today is for you to register for the census. Make sure all of your family members are counted, including your children. Go, do not hesitate. Go today to 2020census.gov to make sure your voice is heard, not only as a registered voter, but as a member of your community through the census. Thank you, Fair Count, for all of your efforts in making sure that everyone is recognized with their census count being included. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Yemi. I'm the Policy Chair of Black Child Development Institute, Atlanta. It has been a pleasure to lead our census initiative, Black Children Count, with the goal of increasing census turnout in Black households and other underserved communities. Not only are we doing amazing work within the Atlanta metro, our outreach spans statewide. Black children are miscounted at alarmingly high rates. Some reasons include a distrust in government, geographic isolation, complex household compositions comprised of multi-generational families, and a lack of knowledge of the census and its importance. The net undercount rate for young Black children is about 50% higher than children of all other races. The census data is so important for Black and Brown families. Census data helps determine funding for programs such as WIC, Medicaid, and Head Start, the federally funded program that provides comprehensive early education, health, nutrition, and parent involvement to low-income children and families. For more information on our organization and our census engagement initiatives, please visit bcdiatlanta.org and blackchildrencount.org. Thank you.
Janine, we have been through so much together in the past 18 months. We've built a team, we've dug into the census, we've learned to telework, we've even learned to educate our children at home while we're working 12 hours a day. It has truly been a ride, my friend. And now, unfortunately, the census and all we've been working for is on the brink of collapse. You know, advocates across the nation have fought against the citizenship question, fought underfunding of the census, understaffing of the census, and now an administration who wants to turn the census into a political tool for partisan purposes. We are facing a serious undercount, particularly in the South, the Southwest, the entire Sun Belt. Black people living in America, rural areas, Hispanic, Latinx, American Indian country, large numbers of these communities are at risk of being erased from the story of America, erased for the next decade, erased from receiving resources for schools, hospitals, infrastructure, erased from having their fair share of political power.
And now the census is being challenged in court. The timeline has been artificially shortened, and our very democracy is in peril. As of today, we have just 1 week to make this right, and that means getting counted. Our board members, Sachin Varghese, and our chair, State Representative Carolyn Hughley, have powerful messages about redistricting and the power of Black women. Our partners, Pluribus Unum, will lay out what is at stake. And finally, our founder, Stacey Abrams, will wrap things up. Her call to action is an inspiration and a directive to get it done. It's up to us now. Let's do it.
Good night. Thank you.
Good night, everyone.
I'm Sachin Varghese, and I live in Atlanta, Georgia. I'm an attorney and a member of Fair Count's Board of Directors. I'm committed to a fair and accurate census so that all people in Georgia receive their fair share of political power during redistricting. Racial gerrymandering is illegal, but those who want to erase the voices of communities of color will be able to do so if those communities are not fully counted. In 2011, following the 2010 census, I represented communities and legislators of color challenging redistricting maps that purposefully placed minority voters into districts designed to diminish their political power. We cannot allow this to happen again in 2021. Communities of color deserve and are entitled to fair representation. They will not receive it if they are not accurately counted. The next decade of political power is on the line today, and it comes down to the census. Please complete it. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Isaiah Hughley, City Manager of Columbus, Georgia, and one of the co-chairs of Fair Count, Black Men Count for Georgia.
I'm State Representative Carolyn Hughley, and I'm honored to be the chair of Fair Count. And we're delighted to talk about the need for the census and for people to complete the census. As you know, the census is the bedrock of our democracy, and it will determine how more than $1.5 trillion will be allocated to our citizens and communities over the next 10 years. So if our communities are not counted, we stand to jeopardize a generation of children that need the resources.
Yes, in Georgia, it is estimated that in the 2010 census, Black men were undercounted by at least 10%. We cannot allow that to happen again in the state of Georgia. And so it's important that Black men step up and be counted, that we don't face that in the 2020 census. A 10% undercount is estimated to be about 67,000 Black men in Georgia. That represents about $154 million that we would lose as a result of an undercount of Black men in Georgia. Again, we simply cannot allow that to stand. We need Black men to stand up, and we need to be counted.
At the end of the day, it's about resources, it's about power. We need each and every one to be counted. So Georgia, let's get counted.
Thank you so much, Stacey, for both your partnership and your leadership in Georgia and across the nation on issues that are important to moving our region forward. None more important right now than responding to the census. Everybody in America knows we do this every 10 years. Everybody counts, but if they don't count you, they can make you not count. It's so critically important that everybody in America, especially those of us in the South, pay attention, because if they don't count you, then they don't have to send you the resources that we need for public education, for healthcare, for emergency response, for first responders. These census counts are also used for political power. They help us draw congressional lines. They help us draw legislative lines. They help us draw school board lines. They are, in essence, the building blocks of democracy for the next 10 years. As we have seen through COVID, the disproportionate impact on people of color has been dramatic, and the census affects us all here too. because getting resources to the ground where we need it and who needs it is critically important. So as we get ready for the next 10 years, the first building block is the census. That is why I am so happy that Fair Count has been leading this effort, and Pluribus Unum is so thrilled to be able to join you in this day. So one of the things that you can do if you're watching is to make sure that you respond to the census. The second thing you can do is talk to your family and your friends. The third thing that you can do is be a voice across America to make sure that the United States of America counts every human being, because everybody counts. So if you need more information, go to www.my20census.gov to complete this census. If you already have, thank you for doing that. Make sure that your friends do it as well. Make sure that you counted. We have way too much at risk to sit this one out. God bless you. God bless America. Let's get counted.
Good evening. Thank you for joining the Census in the South Road to Recovery virtual bus tour. I'm thrilled that an organization I founded, Fair Count, has teamed up with Mayor Mitch Landrieu's Pluribus Unum to raise awareness and mobilize for a fair and accurate census across the South. So much is at stake, and the 2020 census is at the very core of nearly every decision that will be made by the government affecting our lives for the next decade. Will there be quality, affordable healthcare in our communities? Will our schools be overcrowded? Will there be enough lunches for all the children who are hungry? Will safety net programs be there for families who need them? Will Pell Grants be there for college students ready to learn? Will our roads and bridges be able to handle our growing communities? And will my voice be heard by those elected to represent me? Will my state get the resources it needs to recover from COVID-19? There is only one answer to these questions. The answer is yes, but only if we have a fair and accurate 2020 census. The amount of money that's allocated to our communities based on census numbers is staggering. $1.5 trillion every year. I know that sounds like a lot, but it also doesn't sound very real. But think about it this way. An undercount means fewer kids getting school lunches, more crowded classrooms, PPE not going to the communities that need it. An undercount is a loss of resources, but it's also a loss of political power, and it puts our lives at risk. Just last week, Louisiana, Mississippi, and Alabama were hit by Hurricane Sally. Many were forced to evacuate, to seek higher ground, and to seek safer accommodations. Those evacuation routes for natural disasters are planned using census data. Planners need to know where people live and how many people live there to make sure that the evacuation routes can handle the exodus. When I was growing up in Mississippi, I remember those hurried trips north on Highway 49. But we know when the clouds have passed and the damage is assessed, the census count guides the number of dollars and resources that come back to the communities to rebuild. The census has always been a respected institution, much like the United States Postal Service. It works best as an apolitical, statistical federal agency, one dedicated to carrying out the charge of the United States Constitution itself. Because the census is that old. Since 1790, we have done a decennial count of who is here in America. But the census has been under attack in 2020, and now our democracy is in danger. Never before has the census been so politicized, so challenged. And yes, we are in grave danger of failing to meet our Constitution's charge to count all persons, whole persons, once and in the right place. And the South is particularly poised to fail because states across the Southeast are struggling to get counted, while northern states like Maine, Vermont, and Idaho are achieving their goals and securing their resources for the future. The census was already challenged before the pandemic hit. Sadly, it was underfunded, under-resourced, understaffed, and politicized by people who wanted to cull certain communities, effectively erasing them from the story of America. Then the struggling census hit the perfect storm as COVID-19 began to ravage our nation right before Census Day, and the entire operation was upended. Field operations shuttered, programs were delayed, and the health and safety of census workers, along with the accuracy of delayed data, was called into question. America, and in particular the South, continues to be in the throes of a pandemic, and hotspots continue to spike up in cities and in rural communities. Children are doing virtual learning, Unemployment and economic insecurity are soaring. Families are being displaced, and it's affecting communities of color, particularly Black, Latino, Hispanic, and Native American communities the most. Because this is so much about the structural limitations in places like Georgia and Mississippi, we know that the challenges are real. Outside of Louisiana, the South has largely failed to expand Medicaid. The South's rural hospitals make up the majority of all rural hospital closures. In Georgia alone, 2 more rural hospitals, one in Jackson County and one in Randolph County, a lifeline for so many. These hospitals are closing this fall. That speaks to our need to have fair representation that fights for all of us, not some of us, and representation that values the quality of all lives, not just the ones that remind them of themselves. But what that means is that we have to have fair legislative districts, particularly for communities of color who are undercounted in this census. If we don't get our census right, maps governing Congress, state legislatures, city council districts, county commissions, and even your school board will exclude millions of traditionally voters of color and their children, not only from the population count, but from the power count. This in turn will force potentially diverse districts to expand, to get larger, to meet the Constitution's 1 person, 1 vote requirement. But the problem is when so many people are crammed inside, fewer people are heard. This tactic would translate into fewer districts in traditionally diverse areas, and it would give map makers, and yes, we mean politicians, a new opportunity to create even stronger gerrymandered districts that ignore the needs of the communities that are most vulnerable and that need to be heard the most. Simply put, if you aren't counted, your community's political power is diluted, if not erased. Simpler yet, if you're not counted, you won't count. As we wrap up this bus tour with our friends at Pluribus Unum, we will have very little time to get this right. So we need you. We need you to use your power, your voice to get this done. Join us. Text your friends, call your families, knock on the neighbor's door, and be sure they've been counted in the census. Use social media to let everyone you've ever met know about how important they are to your future. Look, I'll end with this. The road to recovery from COVID-19 will no doubt be long, but we'll get there together. And when we get to the other side of this pandemic, we need to return to safe, fully funded schools, to communities with affordable and accessible healthcare, and to an economy that serves all of Georgia's families. Completing the 2020 census is the first step to achieving a fair count and the first step towards our recovery. So if you haven't filled out your census yet, do it today. Visit my2020census.gov or call the number on the screen to do it by phone. If you need assistance, reach out to us here at Fair Count at info@faircount.org, because we'll try and help any way we can. Thank you for joining us tonight. Thank you for understanding the importance of the census. Now, let's get it done.